Hi there, and welcome to the Chrysalis Room, where we heal, become, and thrive. I'm your host, Coach Tay, and today's episode is titled The Hidden Work and Why Healing Happens in Private. So, most transformation doesn't happen in the spotlight. It doesn't, So with social media and different things of that nature, a lot of us like to put it out there and believe that's where it happens. It's not where it happens. It happens in silence, in the places where nobody's clapping for us, nobody's watching, and everything wants to rush the process. Everything in us wants to rush the healing process. Okay, we are very impatient when it comes to our healing, and it just doesn't happen overnight. But in this episode, I'm going to talk about why we resist the hidden work, what happens in private, and the ways to embrace the hidden work, and some reflections in practice. Okay, so some of the reasons we resist the hidden work is because um, there's a cultural pressure that we have now to be visible, to be out loud, to be out there, and our current culture rewards the exposure, the desire to be seen way more than the actual process of changing, of the transformation. You know, you get more recognition for what people can see versus actually changing. And I mean, if you pay attention to social media and different things and influencers and stuff of this nature, this is why, like, later on, like, certain things about them come out because it was never sincere, it was never real. It was just, for show, um, and things like that, because that they want people to look healed. They want people to look like they have it all together, but in reality, mentally and emotionally, they are unraveling. Okay, but they are looking healed or giving off the appearance that they are healed online, just really to be suffering because there's this expectation, right, that you have to keep up with this image. You told everybody that you're healed and you're whole, and you can't be broken and healing online if you've already told us that you were healed and you were whole. So for those of us who are like in our healing journey, and we know, right, that there's the pressure to heal where people can see. um, it creates a tension within ourselves for the people who are in the real process of changing, because when you're really going through this healing process, you really don't want people to see you like that. You really don't. And so, like, the conflict arises because society's, you know, acknowledgement for having everything out there, it creates conflict in you, and you start to question, like, are you really healing? Because it's not visible, all social media verse and etc. And people outside of you are not validating this process for you. And all right, and so when that's the case, you start to discount the healing, the process of the healing that's actually happening for you, because that validation is not there. And so you become very unsure of yourself and unsure of what you're going through, and that could put you in a position where there's a halt to your healing process, because there's this conflict going on that is preventing it. And then also, because of the cultural pressure, like, people have a fear of missing out. Like, sometimes there's trends, especially on, like, TikTok, where people might be talking about their experiences with someone that they would associate with narcissism, or different things like that. They're talking about their anxiety or depressive states and other things that they struggle with. And so, because of the culture, you might feel like, oh, I need to ride this wave, and I can go viral, I can get more followers, I can do different things of that nature. um, and again, that's like rewarding the act of being seen, but not actually the the process of healing and actually transforming. uh, yeah, transforming. Oh my goodness. And it'll also create like this underlying fear, right? Because it's the fear of missing out, like in the success, anxiety, and different things of that nature that are outside of yourself in the social media verse, you will start to process it as pain. It'll start to become painful because the same parts of our brain that activate, like there's threat and there's danger, within our amygdala and our sympathetic nervous system and things of that nature, it will also activate when we perceive social pain. Okay, when we, feel like we're missing out on the virality of our traumas and different things of that nature, that can hurt us too. Or when we decide to heal out loud, for show, and it's not picking up the way we assume like other people's content of similar nature is, our body starts to cycle it in as a threat. We start to feel rejected and abandoned and different things of that nature. It doesn't really help us because the healing should be happening on the inside, and it could be more detrimental when we're actually trying to heal in front of all these people versus doing the actual work. And again, like, it's case by case. Some people are at a level where they can probably manage that, and for the most part, most people are not. Most people are not. And we're all not there, and not everything needs to be there, but to each their own. Um, and the thing is, like, our body also craves the reassurance. It needs the reassurance. It also needs the validation, to feel safe. So reasons we resist, like, doing the work in silence is because, like, if we do out loud, like, we can get reassurance. But if we're doing the work, where all those eyes are not on us, it's kind of hard to know, like, we're on the right path, somebody understands, and that we're not alone. So we rather put ourselves out there, and go through this, and then, like, we'll also resist doing the hidden work because, with social media these days, being visible and having, a certain awareness about yourself is often associated with being more valuable. Like, the more followers and stuff that you have, we associate that with value. And so when we are attempting to engage in our healing process and doing all of that work that's not seen, it can start to feel unsafe, right? Like, it's not really valuable. People don't really value me, and it's not really necessary, and it's not really necessary work because we don't have the validation of the work that's being done when it's done in quiet, and we don't want to feel alone. And being visible, you know, somebody can say something to you, and that attention can make you feel, oh, okay, whether it's good or bad, or however you want to take it, doesn't really work for you. You don't right, you would appreciate it in some kind of way because it will validate, like, somebody saw, somebody responded, somebody sees, whether I agree with what they said or not, somebody sees, and so it takes away from the actual process of healing. The priorities get mixed up, and it creates more conflict, and that's why we resist it, because we want to be recognized when we've done something good. We want recognition, but like, when you're healing, everyone's not cheering for you. If you had addiction issues, people on the outside, not everyone's giving you a hand clap. Some places they give you badges and things of that nature. But that's not always the case for some of the things that we suffer in silence. You know, it's tough in doing. There's a push to put everything out there these days. And that's a real reason why some people resist doing some of the work. Like if they can't do it in private, they can't be seen doing it, then it's not really real to them. Like it's not labeled as real work for them. And when getting outside of like the cultural aspects and the cultural pressure of healing and being seen, I'm gonna dive a little bit into like the nervous system angle, right? So when we are constantly seen and evaluated, right, and judged by people, our sympathetic nervous system stays activated. And what does that mean? Okay, so our sympathetic nervous system is activated because it perceives danger, right? And our brain wants to, that's our comfort zone at this point, right? We are used to this system live 24/7. It never cuts off. It's always looking for danger and telling us that we're in danger. By us being visibly telling everybody like what we're doing and all this stuff, people rejecting us, people coming against us and saying whatever they say, that's not necessarily positive and negative, that validates the danger that our body was receiving, which is why it's like hard to do it in silence, because we don't really have anyone or anything coming up against us interfering with the healing that is coming to take place. And so our body and our brain is a little bit more resistant to that, because it can't validate the perceived danger that is communicating to us is there. And so doing it in silence, right, it activates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of our sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is what calms us down. It allows our bodies to regulate. It allows us to breathe. It allows us to think, okay? And the sympathetic nervous system don't want none of that, okay? It wants all the smoke. So that's why it's a little bit more challenging. So even when we do calm down and we start doing the work, we start doing the journaling, right? A memory gets triggered, and then poof, there goes our sympathetic nervous system all over again. And it's just, it becomes a challenge. It becomes a challenge to do some of this, even just because our nervous system is resistant to the healing, at least in the beginning. Or at least in the beginning, at least until we start being more intentional about our thoughts and reframing and grounding and things of that nature, rewiring our brain. Our bodies become very resistant to healing, because it's not a comfort zone for our bodies when we have been in survival mode for so long. And some other reasons that we resist doing the hidden work is because doing the work in silence, doing the work when nobody's watching us, when there's nobody that can, validate and all that, it creates a psychological safety, right? We don't have to be inauthentic. We don't have to people please. We don't have to keep our guards up, because we're not telling everybody what's going on. Nobody knows. This is something we're keeping very, very private. And because it's private, and because people don't know about it, they can't come up against what they don't know, there goes our nervous system. It starts to act up again, right? It starts to like emphasize our vulnerability. And like when it comes to like therapy, in therapy, the approach is typically, right, the safety over the visibility. Because when you add the visibility into the healing process, it becomes chaotic. There's no regulation there. It becomes a war. But when you prioritize safety first, which is the actual healing, the regulation, the coping, and things of that nature, which is all unseen work, it allows, the healing to take place. We have to feel safe. Our bodies have to be regulated in order for healing to happen. It has to happen that way. Um, and and another reason why we need it to happen in silence is because we are able to experiment. We are able to see how our body heals, what our body actually needs in a way that doesn't make us vulnerable in front of everybody else, which again, activates our sympathetic nervous system, which is, our fight or fight and all of that, which is what our body is craving because that's our comfort zone. So those are some of the reasons. Like doing the healing work is something that can happen in a safe space where there's like no threats, which is contrary to what is normal for us. Okay. So I hope that was kind of clear. A lot of it's just like our body is resisting the calm and the peace and the safety of doing it in private because it's not threatening. It doesn't allow our body and our brains to validate the danger that it continually wants to convince us is there. Okay. So another way to look at it is, is something that I learned, I don't know, maybe last year. But think about a caterpillar. When a caterpillar forms this cocoon, it completely dissolves inside of the chrysalis, okay, or the cocoon. It dissolves, okay, and nothing about turning into mush looks productive, right? But it is in its safe place. The caterpillar's in its quiet place. In the healing, or the transformation that is going to result of that, the process of it, nobody needs to see that mush, right? That completely vulnerability, it all happens in private, and that is the most vital part of the transformation of the process is what is going on in private that can't be tainted or touched by anything else. And you wouldn't want to contaminate that process, because then you get something else that was not the outcome that you desired. So you have to think, when you think of like the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, that has to happen. It has to turn into the mush. It has to have this transformation, and we can give ourselves that too, because it's tough. Everybody's not going to understand, especially if you've watched the previous episodes. Everything that is happening internally within you, people can't identify with that. They can't, and they can only project things on you and from their ignorance, from things that they don't understand. And when you're out there trying to explain things to people that don't understand, it can be even more detrimental to your health. And those are and the reasons, right? Some of the reasons why we resist it is because all of that danger, all of that rejection, all of that stuff validates the sense of danger that our body tells us we're in a state that we've been in, which is our comfort zone. But we're trying to move away from that, and our body is resistant to that. Okay. So while like caterpillars, they undergo this vigorous, process in their bodies, right? This mush. We go through an identical process on our healing and transformation as well, but it doesn't. The difference between us and the butterfly or the caterpillar is that it doesn't require physical transformation. Theirs does, ours doesn't. Ours require more mental, emotional transformation and healing, which later on impacts our physical being. So let's talk about what happens to us when we are healing in private, when we're in our cocoons. Um, when we decide to heal in private, we are more engaged in our cognitive processing. What does that mean? We are more engaged in our thinking processes. We're being more logical, we're being more reflective, we're being more insightful, um, we're, we're being more understanding. And so, things that can help, right? We we are being more reflective, and because we're being more reflective, our hippocampus, which is our brain's memory bank, because our memories are stored, it's it starts to, you know, it stores our traumatic events and experiences as narratives. And when we engage in our thinking processes, we can begin to reframe those narratives about our trauma, which can, you know, it contributes to the healing. It allows us to acknowledge it, but to rewrite it in a way where, you know, it becomes a thing of the past and it's no longer so present. And, you know, we get to see certain things. For example, some of us who were, um, you know, violated in things as children, we think, we begin to believe that, you know, it was something that we did, something was our fault, because, you know, maybe there was another child. Why did they not choose that child? Why did they choose me? You know, so whatever conditions and things that happen, we start to believe it's our fault. We start to believe it was something that we did that warranted that. And so when you decide to heal in the silence, you give yourself the opportunity to acknowledge, you know, whatever age you were, 3 or 4 years old, how that could have never been your fault as a child at that age, as any child. That it was never your fault, you know, that you didn't do anything, you know, you weren't protected. It allows you to reevaluate the situation in a more factual way, and adjust how you process it or have processed it in the past, which allows the healing to take place as well. And it allows you to move away from it. From before, right, it's just something that kept coming up in the subconscious level, and keeping us up and disturbing us. But now we're able to go and process this in a healthy way, in a healing way, in a regulatory way. Um, and then the sleep, you know, you're able to sleep, rest a little bit better, um, because you're able to acknowledge like these thoughts and these emotions associated with them. You're able to reframe them. You're able to put them in their place, and you may be able to let it go, and different things of that nature. And even, you know, engage in things of prayer and different things that strengthen, you know, your thinking process. Because when you're in survival mode for so long, right, your thinking, your higher level of thinking and logical brain, it's not, it's there, but it's not as active, because getting out of danger, and that is always prioritized. So it allows you to regain that part of yourself and exercise that a whole lot more. And even, like, let's say, because even with going through that journey and things of that, you are going to have emotional responses that are going to come up in you, and your body will try to convince you that, hey, that's dangerous, that's not safe, let's not go there. Not, but you can still try your best to push through it and reframe. Like, you know, I'm experiencing discomfort because that experience was hurtful, was very painful for me. However, I'm not experiencing that event right now. I'm safe. And the emotions from it are appropriate for that time. And acknowledge gosh, like I did experience those feelings, right? It allows you to acknowledge it so you can heal, right? And release it from yourself, release it from your body, because that's when your body might shake a little bit, because you found that thought, or that experience that came back up in you. Your body is letting you know where it was lodged in your body, and by properly processing that and allowing your body to experience it and taking full control of the release of it is where the power comes in and the healing starts to take place. So, because if you don't, then those narratives are going to continue to repeat themselves. And if you can recall, if you watched the second episode, I placed a lot of emphasis on the fact that you can't heal with the same thoughts that hurt you. So I want you to be very, very mindful of that. Like, you absolutely cannot do that. So we have to heal. We have to reframe these thoughts. We have to put them in the right perspective so we can stop experiencing how the past is continuing to hijack our present and our future. We can nip that in the bud and really experience a level of freedom and control that we didn't have before, and peace. But it all starts in private. It all starts in private. Some things we absolutely have to do alone or with one trusted individual. It's not something you want to set yourself up to have everybody's mouth on you. Everybody, and when I say mouth, like they're speak all they did. No, you want to be. This is something sacred. Okay, it's not for everybody. Everybody doesn't need to witness it. Everybody doesn't need to know. But you want a safe person for sure that can help you go through this, so you know you're not alone. You're not alone. Or even if you do the work in private, but just somebody to check in with, because it helps. It helps, and especially somebody that's been there and understands everything. Those at those times can be some of the safest people, but you still want to be careful. You want to vet everyone as best as you can. But that's getting ahead of myself. So another thing, also in private, right? You get to regulate your emotions. Sometimes it's kind of hard to do when you're visible and on screen and knowing there's people watching you, different things of that nature, because you have to put on an act, you have to put on a mask, right? You have to give off the appearance that you're okay when really you're not. You're experiencing high levels of anxiety, or you're getting ready to pass out. But in private, you're able to regulate that, right? Especially if you have like a very intense anger experience, where if somebody else there is kind of present, like you might lash out. And it's something that you can take back if it's visible, especially if it's recorded on social media. It's there forever. But when you're in private and you're actually doing that work and you're learning to regulate yourself, so even when you're out in a visible space, right, you've practiced emotional regulation and different things of that nature, so much so that when you're put in a tight spot and someone is trying to push those buttons and someone is trying to trigger you, your body already knows how to start regulating itself, how to start calming down. You might start practicing your breathing, or hey, I need a break. Your responses are different, but you have to do that work in private, because if you're already always out there and you're never giving yourself the opportunity to regulate yourself, it's going to be hard to do it, because people can be impossible, and it's kind of it's tough when you're trying to heal, especially these days. People can exploit that for views, followers, things of that nature. It's not worth the risk. But if you are self-aware enough, and it's not a one size fits all. Everybody's at different stages of their healing. Some people, manage that. Some people absolutely cannot. So you want to be mindful of that. But if you have so many other people's voices in your head and you're not clear on who you are, how can you do that? How can you do that? You can't. You can't. So you want to get to the place where you're alone and, be self-aware, like understand, like being emotionally regulated allows you to do things for you, not because there's pressure, not because someone said something about you and now you're trying to prove this, or you're trying to prove contrary to what they said. No, we don't want to. That's not healing. That's not whole. That's not peace. We want to do things because it's stemming from us. We feel safety. We find that safety there. We are in control. We're not operating out of something somebody told, or some mistreatment and abuse. We don't know. We're regulated. We're regulated. We make our own decisions from the own safety and calmness from within. You know, not from external pressures, things that people spoke over us. We don't move that way no more. But you have to do the work in quiet, or you have to do the work. You have to do the work to get to that state where you value yourself so much, so you value your peace, um, and that calm state of mind over all those other things. Um, and when because some of these things are going to be happening at the same time, right? When you're working on your thoughts and you're regulating your emotions, because they're going to play off each other. In this process of being active in this way, you will begin to reconstruct your identity. Your sense of self is going to change, because like in episode 2 I talked about, when you're in survival mode for so long, you have you get conditioned to believing that, like, you are your emotions, you are your past. That becomes your identity. Like, I am this, right? And this is why sometimes we give ourselves these labels. I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm broken. You identify with the things that hurt you, the things that injured you, including the thoughts and the emotions. You think that's who you are. But the more you're able to engage in higher levels of thinking, right? Because your body's in, the parasympathetic state. It's calm enough for you to think and reflect and review, and fix some of these narratives, fix some of these perceptions that weren't as accurate, or fulfilling for your life, or more detrimental, and that you outgrown them, and that also, like, allowed your past to be very active and present in who you are today. Things that happened maybe 30 years ago are still controlling your life today. But doing the hidden work allows you to see that, and say, oh wow, that has no place here, you know and move it out the way. It allows you to deal with it properly. Move it out the way, and then, hey, I'm not that person. That was my trauma, or that was my survival mode. Like, that was just, no. I can turn that off. Like, I actually like this stuff. I actually value myself. I actually do value myself. I actually do think I'm a person that's worth loving. I really think that. And it was just, as a response to all of these things, like, I was kind of conditioned into thinking that I wasn't that valuable. This is what engaging in higher levels thinking allows to happen. And it's so healing, and it's so freeing, and like, we all deserve to be there, people. Um, so there was, like, for me, there was a time in my life where grief was most of the experience. It was a very grievous thing, and it was so hard. And I started to, like, I would post on, like, Facebook, like, things, pictures of me and my daughter, you know, because I guess I was, like, healing, visibly. I wasn't like putting too much out there, but kind of like, you know, like this is the part of my life that I'm enjoying right now. You know, these experiences um, that are bringing me joy. But you know, some people that were familiar with, you know, the situation would comment, and I would just the comments were so like hurtful because I wasn't at a place, I wasn't in a position where I was regulated enough in myself to be able to put myself out there when I'm in such a state. And so eventually, you know, I did. I deleted my Facebook. You know, I just disappeared. And I made peace with the fact that this was something that I could not do visibly. This was something that I just had to disappear. You know, get a new phone number. Not, you know, nobody knew my phone number. Um, because it was a very very big deal, you know, and I just had very clear boundaries with within myself because it was a moment that was either gonna make or break me, and it was very very hard getting through that grief, and also being a mom who was alone, um, and technically like a teen mom, but I mean I was like 19, but I was completely, you know, on my own and homeless. So it was a very very sensitive time for me, and I could not be visible. You know, I didn't want people to be able to find me and cause more problems. I was too vulnerable for myself, and I also had a child that was under 1 years old, and so I knew and I made the decision for myself that I can't do this publicly, that I can't share this experience, and I have to keep this to myself until I'm at a place where I can breathe, you know, where I've healed and I understand, and you know, and all the processes that I needed to go through, I went through them. And right, because grief is never a straight line or whatever, but will be times, right? Sometimes your emotional state will come up and come down, but got to the place enough where it didn't control my actions. Like I didn't have a breakdown, I could breathe, I could work, I could function without breaking down, um, and things of that nature. So that's something that um, I did, and I don't regret it. I don't regret it. I owe that to myself. And I think it was the best thing that I ever could have done for myself at that time. Because, you know, hindsight, now I don't know how it would look if I try to involve all these people in, you know, in the real life, keep them all involved, or even social media, you know, made it even bigger. I don't know how I would have came out or how I would have turned out from that, but I'm glad that I chose to do it in silence and, you know, focus on my responsibilities and learn who I was becoming at that part and stage in my life. So, um, and it was the best way I could have protected myself, which was great. And I learned to embrace it while I was going through it, because it was, you know, it was a little bit hard, but well, honestly, what yeah, it was, but then I just knew I had to completely cut all of that off, and I embraced it. And when I started to embrace it, because there was peace, I was actually able to breathe. I didn't have to worry about other stuff, you know, because I was going through so much. I couldn't handle other people's feelings, other people's thoughts, other people's lives that I had no power to change when I'm trying to get mine and keep it together, you know. So it was the best form of protection and gift that I could have gave myself at that time. And so here are some ways, right, that you can start to embrace the hidden work, because we all should. You know, we all should, in a society, in a world that wants everybody and everyone's business out there, especially while you're going through, you know, certain things. Let's learn to heal in silence, right? There's a time. Sometimes there's a time to speak, and there's a time to be quiet. You know, And when everything is fresh, that's not the time. That's not the time. You're the most vulnerable in that state, right? It's like if you experience the injury, right, and you're bleeding out. It ain't the time to talk about it. It's the time to get that wound treated and closed up and sealed. Okay? Same thing. You're bleeding out right now. Why? You're just bleeding everywhere, right? You're trying to be visible and bleeding, and people are not in a position. Are not in a position. If any, they're just watching you bleed out. That's why it's best to do it, the hidden work in silence, where even if you are bleeding, right, you can go to the doctor, or you can do the work to heal the wound and get stuff done. Um, like I tried the metaphor, it worked for me. Like I understand, but I'm gonna get better at this and give myself some grace. And also just breathe. Like I know it's like deep stuff and it's heavy stuff. But man, if I could just tell you guys my story, you guys wouldn't believe like how I can talk about these things and be okay. But that's because I did the healing, I've done the work. Am I perfect? No, it takes time. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. I still have to work through these things actively, actively, because my body was in that mode for over 20 years. Okay, over 20 years, hard. It's gonna, according to the statistics, it's gonna take at least twice as long for my body to reach a baseline where, it's not so elevated all the time. And that's what they say. But obviously the more intentional you are about your healing process, I believe it can happen a lot sooner. Alright. So let's start embracing the healing work. How can you do that? Instead of viewing the work being done in silence, the healing work, as isolation, view it as incubation. Okay, you're because isolation kind of sounds bad, like you're removed. Like no, like you're not hidden. You're being developed. Okay, when you think about how plants grow, yeah, they're being incubated. They're in the dirt. It's dark. They're alone. Nobody can see the roots start to grow, and all of that. By the time they see the leaf coming up, that's how they know. But they don't see everything else going on. Nobody sees that. But it doesn't mean work isn't being done. It's just not seen. You know. So reframe it from that. Like I'm being incubated right now. I'm being prepared, and certain things don't require anybody else but me. Okay. So get there. You're not hiding. You are doing what needs to be done, right? You're doing what needs to be done, how it needs to be done. It's okay. And instead of like why me? Why me? No. What's being formed in me? What am I becoming? What is gonna be the outcome of this healing, right? When you're trying to reconstruct and understand who you are and the person you want to be and the person you were meant to be, you don't want anyone else coming in tainting that with trying to tell you who you are and who you're supposed. No, you don't know. You're not me. You don't. How would you know? How would you know? You wouldn't. You couldn't. You've never walked in these shoes. You've never been in this body. How can you tell me who and how I'm supposed to be? You can't. So don't view it as no. Embrace it. Nobody else can bring you forth but you. No, nobody else. You only have that fingerprint. Nobody else. That will never be another you. Don't let anybody else convince you otherwise, that you're supposed to be somebody else. You're not. You're not. And that is something that I struggle with for a long time, because when you live the kind of life that I have, and you experience the kind of things that I've experienced, you get conditioned and you learn. So when I say learn, I'm talking about conditioning. You get conditioned to believe that people don't want you, right? That you as who you are, what you love and enjoy, is wrong, because that is what you were taught to believe by the things people have done to you, the things people said to you, so on and so on and so forth. They try to convince you that there's not much value in who you are. We don't value you, which are lies, which are lies. And begin to identify with them until we don't. So I need you to embrace you for who you are, so you can be you, for you, okay? And not just for you, but when you do your healing and stuff, you'll understand that there's somebody out there that needs you to be you, that needs you to be you so they can be them, okay? It's worth it for you. It's worth it for me. It's worth it for us. All right, and other ways to embrace the hidden work is just practicing some of these practices, being reflective, journaling, okay? And maybe if you're not writing things down, writing things down help a lot. But maybe you can make vlogs, you do some vlogging just for you, just for you. Don't post anything. Do it just for you. Do it, write a book, that could be, as long as it's reflective, it can very help you because it converts your emotion into language. And by doing that, it also strengthens your prefrontal cortex in the process of, your higher level thinking, processing, and reflection. It exercises that more and makes it, stronger. And then you can also do some sensory grounding out in nature. Go on walks. Get you some greenery in your life. Get you some calm. Get you some peace, that helps you embrace. Sometimes when I'm out there along, a river or something, it's the calmness there, and I can speak about certain things. I can release, especially near water. Like, I often feel like an urge to release a lot of emotions, and I just, because water, is attributed to like healing properties and cleansing. When we see water, we think of that, and it's just freeing to do that. It's like it's the nature to do that. So you want to give yourself these opportunities to heal and be in environments that are conducive to that. And you also can engage in healing work through creative expression. Like when I was in high school, going through the things that I went through, one of my biggest outlets was the guitar. Writing. I used to write poetry before I learned how to play the guitar, so poetry was a big part of it. But music was big for me. Creative ways of expression, because sometimes the emotion is so heavy, I don't have the words for it, but I found a different way to release it, and it was very freeing, and it was a very great coping mechanism at that time for me. And then, dancing is a big one as well. But it helps integrate those emotions, allowing them to find the escape so they don't just stay buried and lodged to, your organs and organ systems and cause some malfunctioning. Art, cooking, cleaning can be a way of, creative expression as well. You can get creative, and some of these things also have like, oh my god, they can also be like very, like forms of meditation, like running is repetitive. It can, things of that nature. Even cooking, like if you get in a certain kind of rhythm and stuff, it can put your body in like a meditative state. Other things you can do to embrace the hidden work is, working on boundaries, which is big during your healing, right? Like I said, we want to limit the overexposure. This is not for everybody. If people are not safe, if we no, you can't come near me. I'm not telling you nothing that's going on with me. It's none of your business. I'm good. That's all you need to know, right? If you got a block game, get your block game up, because listen, sometimes you got to be about your healing business, and everybody does not get access to you in any shape or form of the matter, okay? And that just needs to be what that is. Let me see. Yeah, because you just don't want to allow, while you're trying to heal, people to continue to open these wounds that you just closed, okay? or you're doing the work on right now, and they just widen. No, we're not gonna do that in 2026. We're not doing it. Um, so we don't want to. We don't get these boundaries, and boundaries, they're not bad. They are just how you change your relationship to others, or to certain things. Boundaries with what you watch, boundaries, with what you consume on social media, with what the kind of music you listen to, and then clearly there's relational boundaries with people in the workspace, and boundaries with yourself. You need to have boundaries for how you talk to yourself. If your self-talk is negative, we gotta work on that. We gotta, nope, I'm not gonna be thinking that about myself. Every day I'm gonna tell myself I'm worthy, that I'm beautiful, that I deserve to be here, I deserve to be living. I worked hard, I survived I went through all of that to get to this point, you know? I fought for this. We not doing that negative stuff. We not not in 2026. And another way you can embrace this healing work is understand the time and the trust and embrace it, right? Because healing doesn't happen overnight. Our body is accustomed to the chaos. It is accustomed to the negativity. Okay, and we have to actively engage in the reframing. We have to actively engage in our thinking processes, emotional regulation. We have to be very, very active in that. Whether that's in a creative space, finding out what works with us, and that is what's happening in this quiet place. You know, what helps you calm down? What are gonna be your go-tos? What are your toolboxes when you're escalated? Who is your safe person? What's your safe word? Where's your safe place? And understand, right? The 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 consensus is, right, like it takes 3 months. Is it 3 months? I believe it's 3 months, somewhere around there. They say it takes about 3 months to build a new habit, to make it habit, to form it. But when it comes to like rewiring our brain, it it's been said, in the journal of sociology, that it takes on average about 66 days to rewire some of the neural connections that our brain has. So that takes time. 66 days, guys. That's about 2 months. Okay? So we have to understand that it's a process that we have to embrace, right? Not that we're failing, but I'm learning and I'm improving every day. Um, Language is a big, big, big part of that. So we want to be mindful, okay? And you want to understand that your brain is catching up to your new pace. You are catching up as well. Like I said, you can be consciously active in these things that I've discussed, but your body is going to be resistant for a while until it gets more proof and more evidence and more repetition, and able to recognize what safety is and that you're safe, and it won't resist as much. But it's going to take, according to stats, according to research, at least around 66 days. But I'm getting ready to bring this to a close, you guys. Just wow. The human body is something else. The brain, just, and there's still probably so many things we don't even know about it. But just don't forget the brain's superpower, that you can act on your healing. You can participate, right? Healing happens in private, right? And healing, it doesn't ask for permission. It asks for presence. It just wants to take place. That's why we experience the things that we do, because it wants to heal. Our bodies want to heal, but we fight it too, because it's not comfortable. But we can heal, guys. we can get out of survival mode. All right, so to wrap this up, um, I want you to think about, where is it in your life do you need to be unseen so you can be undone? So where is it in your life that you need to go into a cocoon? Right? What is all of this that you're? Cause sometimes it could be a relationship. You're trying to do all of this out in the open, and maybe you just need to be still. You know, when I've coached couples before, like I tell them, we're gonna have our separate sessions, and then there will be times where we come together. Why? Because you cannot heal together, right? Because now we're just triggering each other. No, 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 no. Let me work with you. Let's get you to understand yourself as I'm working with your partner. Same thing. And when I feel you guys are in a space where we can communicate, where we can actually practice active listening, then we're gonna bring everything together. So where do you need to be? You know, even if it's in your relationship, if there's betrayal and different things of that nature, what parts of you need to go in private and become unavailable until the transformation happens, until the healing takes place? I want you to think about that. Like, where are you bleeding right now that needs to be stitched, that needs to be healed, that needs some work? Um, and then I want you to choose. I want you to choose like a daily practice, or however you want to subscribe it, of privacy. You know, maybe it's putting your phone on do not disturb, or maybe it's, you know, not getting on social media, or maybe it's not calling people that you would usually call when you having a moment that don't really help the issue but just fuel the fire. So I want you to think about things like that. So maybe it's like a morning routine, just being silent, you know, going for a walk somewhere, you know, especially as a mom, this can be more challenging, but making it happen. Making it happen. It doesn't matter. You gotta make it happen. And then also, when you figure that out, treat that space as your chrysalis, okay? Just, you need your safe space. You gotta find space. Sometimes it's not always physical. Sometimes, you know, it's mental, and that's okay. And I would just want to leave with, right, the hidden work. It matters. You know, it may not be seen. People are not clapping. People are not validating, right? Along the way, people are not doing these things, but it counts and it matters, especially to your body. Okay, I don't want you to discount it. I want you to embrace it and understand that it's okay. It's okay. If you want to have more in life, it requires work. But you want to really be you when you do, right? You don't want to be wearing someone else's identity. You want yours. You want to find that, and you want to embrace it because it's beautiful and it's strong, and you deserve it. Um, you know, in a world that trusts visible outcomes that they see, value the process of what they don't see, right? Because what you do in private, it'll manifest itself in public. It will. So just do the time to do the work, and it'll all happen. Um, you don't have to rush it. Don't rush the process, okay? Because then eventually, like, you kind of break down, right? If a caterpillar, if a butterfly, you know, someone opens up the cocoon, the butterfly can't fly because the wings didn't fully develop and they're too weak. So you want to make sure everything that is supposed to take place so you can soar. Okay, and that is all I have for you guys on this episode. Thank you for joining the Chrysalis Room, where we heal, become, and thrive. All right, see you next time.